Good morning, students. Today we are going to continue with the next part of Russian Revolution. We will do today 2.5, that is the First World War and the Russian Empire, and then we will continue with part 3, that is the February Revolution in Petrograd. So let's start with the impact of World War I on Russia. In World War I, children, there were two parties which participated. We have Germany mainly on the one side, and on the other side there were elite powers like Britain, Russia, France, and later on it was joined by USA. In the earlier part of the chapter, I have shown even the map also where you have seen about the central axis powers and as well as the allied powers. Even Austria was there along with Germany in the war. When Russia entered into the war, it entered because it was the Germany which actually had attacked upon the Russia. So Russia had to enter into the war. In the beginning of the war, Russian army lost badly with the Germany and Austria. A lot of Russian army lost and they died and so many casualties were there. For example, about 7 million casualties were there by 1917 of Russian army. Destruction of crops and buildings by Russian army leads over 3 million refugees in Russia because these the forces like German forces and Austria forces of they used to attack and they used to hide in the buildings in the agricultural regions. They used to hide. So in order to kill the enemies, a lot of buildings and lot of crops had to be destroyed by the Russian army because in the beginning the Russian army was losing and later on the Russian army was itself after the German and Austrian army, and these German and Austrian army, they were hiding in the buildings and the in between these crops. So that's why they had to be destroyed to kill the enemies. Soldiers. Now the war continued. We all know the First World War took place between 1914 to 1918. If the war continues for a longer time, children, there will be so much of destruction. Not only the people, the army will die, but it will destroy even the economy of the country. The people of Russia in the beginning, they were supporting the war. Even the soldiers were a part of the war. But as the war prolonged for a longer time, soldiers also did not wish to fight such a war because this kind of war was destroying the economy of Russia, as this war also had a severe impact on the industries of Russia. Again, during the war, large amount of the industrial production have to be diverted towards the industries, towards the war. Whatever is produced in the industry, that had to be diverted towards the war. Especially during the war times, all the industries start producing the war equipment or the whatever is necessary for the soldiers. So that way the economy gets destroyed. And not only this, as German control of the Baltic Sea, in the olden time, the large amount of the trade was taking place through the water routes. So if any country is occupying any water route, that means your supply of the materials would stop. Suppose, for example, tomorrow any country occupies the Indian Ocean routes through which India trades. What will happen? Automatically, our trade will get destroyed. In the same manner, Germany controlled upon the Baltic Sea, which was the main route for Russian trade. For them, all the goods supplied from this route. So as soon as German controlled over the Baltic Sea, Russian cut off from the supplies of machines to industries. So there were no suppliers. There was no supply to the industry because industry requires a lot of raw materials which were not reaching to the industries of Russia as the sea was occupied by the German troops. So this war had a lot of negative impact, especially upon not only in Russia, children, even upon all the countries who were involved in the war. We also have studied again in the Hitler's chapter after the First World War, what was the condition of Russia. There was no food, even not only in Russia, even in Germany, there was no food to eat. The same thing happened in Europe. The same thing happened in Russia. So whenever there is a war, it will have a negative impact only upon the countries. So a lot of people were not happy to be involved in the war. So this war also had adversely affected industries. Railway lines began to break in 1916 because even the industries were affected and lot of bombing is done, due to which a lot of railway lines were continuously disrupted. So that also had disrupted the supplies to the industries. Then coming to the further impact of the war, let me scroll down, children, so that we don't miss any point here. Okay, even the small workshops producing essential goods, the small, even the small workers, small workshops, small scale industries which were producing the essential goods, even all of them had to be shut down due to labor shortage. You may think, what happened to labor? Earlier there was so much of labor in Russia. Suddenly what happened? Children, all the labor was diverted towards the war. All the, not only the soldiers were involved in the war, even the labor men, the good men with a good physique, they all were diverted towards the war. And as a result, so because the labor was diverted towards the war, there was nobody to work in the workshops. There was nobody to work in the agricultural fields. As a result, by the winter, and you know that in Russia the winters are very severe. So by the winters in 1916, even the bread and flour became scarce. There was no bread, there was no even the flour to eat. That means even these basic things were not there in the country. So what happened? Were the people happy with this kind of war? Especially in Russia, the people of Russia were earlier supporting the war. But now what happened? Were they supporting the war? Definitely not supporting. We have done, The Tsar Nicholas II was the king at the time of the war. But during the war, there was so much of loss for the Russia that the people were fed up of such wars and they wanted that the Tsar should take back this. He should step back from the war. He should not be involved in the war. Due to which, now let us see what kind of the resolutions or impact happened after the war. We are doing now February Revolution, which is a continuation part of this World War I. Now we are going to do what happened in Russia during this war. Petrograd was given in the winter of 1917. There was a Petrograd is a name of a region, children. So there was a severe impact of the war, and now we are talking about in the winter 1917 the conditions in the capital. This is the capital city of Russia at that time, Petrograd. It was having a very dark impact. Grim, there is a word grim. Grim means a dark impact in the Petrograd. Now, what is the dark impact, children? It is given. There was heavy food shortage in the workers' quarters. On the one side, there were the workers' quarters and factories which were located on the right bank of the river Neva. There was a river called as River Neva. So there, on one side of this river bank, the workers' quarters and factories were there, which were having very poor conditions. But on the left bank, there were fashionable areas. That is the rich people who were called as aristocrats. These people used to live on the left bank of this river Neva, which had very spacious big bungalows, big buildings, including the palace where the Duma met. That is where the parliamentarians used to meet. So they had all luxuries of the life. On the other side, the poor workers' conditions were very worse, especially in the winters. So, what happened during this time? In February 1917, food shortages were deeply felt in the workers' quarters. There was no food to eat in the workers' quarters, and the winter was very severe. There had been exceptional frost and heavy snow was there upon the, especially the poor were the effect. The poor had a lot of effect of this. Parliamentarians wishing to preserve elected government were opposed to the Tsar's desire to dissolve the Duma. On February 22nd, a lockout took place at a factory, followed by a strike next day. So because the workers' conditions were very poor, especially in this kind of winters, because of which the factory workers started a strike. Demonstrating workers crossed from the factory quarters to capital. They started marching. The workers from their homes, from the factories, they started marching towards the capital city. No political party organized this movement. This movement was entirely by the workers. So, the demonstrated workers crossed the factory quarters. They reached to the center of the capital. And at this stage, no political party was actively involved in this movement. The fashionable quarters and official buildings were surrounded by the workers. What did the workers do? When the workers they came to the capital, there they completely surrounded the official buildings. And when they surrounded the official buildings, the government imposed a curfew. What do you mean by curfew, children? Even you might have seen many times our government it declares a curfew. Curfew means nobody is supposed to come out and especially form any group or any association. So the government imposed the curfew, and also later it has suspended the Duma. Who is the government here? Tsar. Tsar's government we are talking about. So he imposed the curfew and he also suspended the Duma. That means no parliament will exist. That is, these are the decisions the Tsar had taken. And the police headquarters were also ransacked. People raised slogans about the bread, better hours, and democracy. The demands of the people were mainly bread. They wanted good working conditions, better hours of work, and also democracy. Cavalry, that is the military, they were called by the government to control these people. So the people were beaten, and they finally in the evening the demonstrators dispersed. Because of the action taken by the military, the workers had to go back in the evening. But they came back again on the 24th and 25th. The government again called the cavalry and the police to keep an eye on them. But on 25th February, what happened on 25th February? The government suspended the Duma. The date is given in the book. Here it is not given. Yes, the dates are given, effects of this February Revolution. So on 25th February, Tsar Nicholas II, he had suspended or dissolved the Duma. On 22nd February, as I already told you, factory lockout on the right bank took place. On 27th February, the police headquarters ransacked. Regiments support the workers. Formation of Soviet. Many soldiers, that is, those who were taking part in the war, Russian, that is in the First World War, many of them, they supported the workers. And the formation of Soviet had taken place. That is, Soviet is in the beginning a small organization. So when the workers started this kind of revolution, many soldiers joined it and they all together formed a association called as Soviet. Why? Because even the cavalry, even the military, initially they had taken action upon the workers, but later on even the military refused to fire on the demonstrators. Tsar asked to fire upon these, kill these workers, but the military refused to do so. And an officer was shot at the barracks of a regiment and three other regiments, and many of them, they went against the Tsar and joined the workers. By that evening, I'm telling you the story here, children. By that evening, the striking workers had gathered to form a Soviet, or it is also called as council, in the same building as the Duma met, where the parliamentarians earlier used to meet. In the same place, these workers and the soldiers, all of them, they met and they formed a council called as Soviet, and this was named later on as Petrograd Soviet. The very next day, a delegation went to see the Tsar. That is, delegation means a few members from the Soviet Council. Now, who formed the Soviet Council? The workers and the soldiers together, who were all against the war, who were all against the Tsar. So, out of these so many workers and the soldiers, few representatives, they are called as delegation, they went to meet the Tsar. Military commanders advised him to abdicate. All these military commanders, they told him to step down. They don't want now any more Tsar to control the country. So they told him to step down. And Russia's future to be decided by a constituent assembly. So they asked the Tsar to step down so that the future of the Russia will be decided by an elected assembly, not by the Tsar. And these elections would be on the basis of universal adult suffrage. It is same as universal adult franchise. And Petrograd had led the February Revolution that brought down the monarchy in February 1917. So, this is the story how the Tsar had stepped down and there was a change from monarchy, how the monarchy had come down and it was taken over by the democracy in Russia. So that is called as February Revolution. So just I'm reading from this what is given on the screen, you can see. So on 2nd March, the Tsar abdicated his power. He had to give his powers. The Soviet and Duma leaders formed a temporary or a provincial government for Russia. The February Revolution had no political party in the forefront. That means there was no political party who was actually taking part here. It was entirely led by the people themselves. Who were those people? The workers were the workers who actually started this February Revolution. Petrograd had brought down this revolution which started at Petrograd. It had brought down the monarchy in Russia and thus gained a significant place in the Soviet history. So this February Revolution, or it is also called as Petrograd Revolution, it had brought down the monarchy in Russia. So that is why this had a lot of important or a significant place in the history of the Russia. Trade unions. By inspiring from this revolution, a lot of trade unions grew in number in the country. There was no monarchy to rule. The Russia's future would now be decided by a constituent assembly. So now there would be no king or no monarchy who would decide the Russian future. It would be the constituent assembly. That means a few members who will frame the constitution and they will decide that how the what will be the future of Russia, on what basis the Russia will be ruled. And also this constituent assembly, who were the members of the constituent assembly? The members of the constituent assembly will be decided on the basis of universal adult suffrage. That means this would be elected. It would be elected. The Constituent Assembly members will be elected by the people of Russia. Petrograd finally had led the February Revolution that had brought down the monarchy in 1917. That's about your effect of February Revolution. So it's a very, very important revolution in Russia. Children, in this whole chapter, you will study two revolutions, two main revolutions. One is February Revolution and one is your October Revolution. In February Revolution, it's very clear the monarch, it was started by the workers of Russia and they brought down monarchy. They have brought down monarchy and there was a constituent assembly framed in Russia. So that's about your February Revolution, children, which we have completed it. So I think it's very, very clear what happened in February Revolution. So in February, again I'm repeating, the monarchy was brought down. February Revolution started by the workers of Russia, which was later on joined even by a lot of military of Russia who were fed up of the First World War, and they also wanted an end to the monarchy. And when they have finally were able to bring down the monarchy, Tsar had finally to accept the uh, the whatever the workers and the military had given the instructions to him, that now the country will be ruled as per the constitution. So a constituent assembly was formed on the basis of universal adult suffrage. Who that means the people will be electing the members of constituent assembly. That is the February Revolution which had brought down the monarchy. That's all for today, children. As in the next part of the chapter, you will be doing another revolution, another famous revolution, which is called as October Revolution. So there will be a different revolution from the February Revolution. You should not get confused between the February Revolution and October Revolution. That's why in the next part only I will be doing your October Revolution. That's all, children. Go through the February Revolution carefully, all the points from this PPT as well as from your book, and you can also write a short note on February Revolution. That's all, children. Have a good day till your next video.